Ladies and gentlemen, as we cast our gaze upon the unfolding landscape of the Women's National Basketball Association, we are compelled to acknowledge a grim and unsettling reality. With the arrival of each new day, the chasm between the league and the players' union seems not merely to persist, but to widen, festering into a situation that is unequivocally worsening. We stand at a moment in time that, by all rational metrics and historical precedents, should have been a period of jubilant celebration, a veritable golden age of anticipation and growth. Had a new collective bargaining agreement been signed, we would currently be witnessing players jetting across the country, engaging in the vibrant commerce of free agency, and igniting the passions of fan bases eager to see the new architecture of their beloved teams. We should be observing the exhilarating mechanics of multiple expansion drafts, watching the fluid movement of talent that defines a healthy, thriving professional sports ecosystem. The momentum was there, palpable and electric. We have discussed this extensively, the unprecedented surge of interest driven by the Caitlyn Clark phenomenon, the organic growth of the league's footprint, and the monumental promise of a new media rights deal. Yet, even in the absence of an official lockout or a strike at this precise juncture, we are witnessing a sequence of events that is actively damaging the league. The fan base, that lifeblood of any professional endeavor, is becoming visibly exhausted. They are weary not just of the stalemate, but of the specific posture and conduct of the players' union. There is a sense that the approach has descended into something personal, characterized by rhetoric and tactics that one might uncharitably, yet accurately describe as low rent. Into this atmosphere of toxicity comes the concept of a moratorium. The idea, floated as a necessary pause button, was intended to halt the machinery of league business until a collective bargaining agreement could be firmly established. We can now confirm that such an agreement on a moratorium has effectively been reached. The WNBA and the WNBPA have come to terms on this suspension of transaction, a development necessitated, as sources have indicated to ESPN's Ramona Shelburne, by the failure of both sides to reach a new accord or an extension by the critical January 9th deadline. This news, having just broken, underscores the paralysis gripping the sport. The logic, ostensibly, was that it made little sense for franchises to be extending qualifying offers, issuing core designations, or courting free agents in a vacuum without the foundational clarity of a new CBA. However, despite this overarching freeze, we must analyze a strategic maneuver that occurred just prior, a move that I maintain was fundamentally astute on the part of the league's operators. The decision by WNBA teams to send out qualifying offers, even amidst this uncertainty, was a calculated stroke of psychological brilliance. It was a necessary step to shift the cognitive focus of the players away from abstract ideologies and back toward the tangible reality of currency. There is a profound necessity here to compel the players to think more about their actual money and less about the theoretical construct of revenue sharing. Let us be brutally honest about this sticking point. The current fixation on revenue sharing is, for all intents and purposes, a pipe dream. It is an economic fantasy, a pursuit of a treasure that simply does not exist in the coffers as they currently stand. The tragedy is that the union appears willing to jeopardize the very existence of the league over this pipe dream, a goal that was never rooted in the fertile soil of financial realism. One must question the caliber of counsel being provided to these athletes. Whoever is advising the players on the business intricacies of this negotiation is leading them down a perilous path, one that threatens to kill the business entirely. The players are listening to this advice, absorbing it, and acting upon it with a fervor that defies economic gravity. We have learned from front office sports that the union's reaction to the league's proposals has been one of hypersensitivity and profound grievance. They reportedly felt that the league's proposal contained unnecessary language beyond the simple mechanics of delaying free agency. According to sources familiar with the granular details of these negotiations, the union sought to surgically remove language in its counterproposal. It appears that no matter what is presented, an agreement cannot be seamlessly ratified without the injection of conflict. It seems that even when they arrived at the precipice of this moratorium agreement, the Players Association felt compelled to alter the terms, to make some kind of change driven by an emotional response that suggests they are, to use a colloquialism, butthurt regarding every action taken by the league. This hypersensitivity is dragging the process to a snail's pace at the very moment when velocity is required. The last thing this league needs is a deceleration of its business functions. On a recent Monday afternoon, the union received a response from the league following a directive sent last week to every team's front office. The WNBA advised its franchises that they could, and indeed should, begin sending out qualifying offers and core designations under the terms of the expired agreement. The reaction rippling across the league was described as a mixture of confusion and frustration. Multiple sources indicated that these offers would effectively be meaningless, as players would inevitably sign contracts based on the overhauled salary system currently being negotiated. But to view this solely through the lens of contract ratification is to miss the deeper strategy at play. It was never about getting the players to immediately sign these specific documents. It was never the expectation that pen would meet paper before a new CBA was in place. This was a chess move by Adam Silver, by Kathy Engelbert, and by the WNBA ownership groups. It was a wise, tactical deployment designed to insert the concept of guaranteed money directly into the minds of the players. It was about anchoring their expectations in reality. Currently, Lexi Brown and Kalani Brown stand as the only players not on rookie contracts who are signed through 2026. The landscape is otherwise barren of long-term certainty. The response from the union leadership regarding this tactic has been telling. WNBPA Vice President Brianna Stewart, speaking recently at Unrivaled, remarked, "They might be going out because that's how it's written." This comment illuminates a deeply problematic dynamic that we cannot ignore. We have prominent figures speaking from the platform of a competitor, a rival professional league. It strikes one as deeply unprofessional. There is a messaging discipline being enforced across the Players Association and its executive committee, a standard directive to ensure everyone remains on the same side, which explicitly involves not signing anything. The fear-mongering tactic employed here is the suggestion that if a player signs, they will be locked in to those specific numbers. Consequently, the entire labor force is held in a rigid holding pattern. If this were a typical functioning free agency window, general managers would have until January 20th to dispense these qualifying offers and core designations. However, teams are not expected to send out offers as discussions continue over the very moratorium they have just agreed upon. This represents the first major deadline that the WNBA and the union are facing that begins to officially push back league business from the timeline laid out in the current CBA. The implications of this delay are far-reaching and structurally damaging. The league is already falling behind schedule regarding the expansion draft, a critical mechanism for the incoming Toronto and Portland franchises. These organizations require certainty. They need the draft dates, which are not explicitly laid out in the legally binding CBA, leaving them in a state of operational limbo. Furthermore, we must consider the logistical nightmare emerging regarding venues. As Ramona Shelburne brought to light, we are now facing a scenario where arenas are looking to book dates that would otherwise have been reserved for WNBA games. The players, in their entrenched position, do not appear to be thinking this through. They are failing to calculate the cascading effects of their intransigence. One has to wonder, in the quiet corners of the locker rooms, how many players actually wish to accept the current CBA? It is a question that demands an answer, though one is unlikely to be forthcoming. I would love to know the true number of athletes who look at the offer on the table and desire to take it. Let us be real about the culture within this league. We have discussed on numerous occasions the history of bullying that permeates the internal dynamics of this group. Players treating each other badly, a culture of social enforcement. Therefore, one must ask, what fate awaits the individual who breaks ranks? What would be done to the player who expresses a desire to sign the CBA and simply play basketball? How do you imagine that conversation going? You cannot convince me that there is not a palpable level of intimidation currently circulating through the veins of the union and its membership. Can you imagine the plight of a single player or perhaps a small cluster of 12 who might look at the proposal and say, "I want to sign the new CBA"? How would they be treated by the collective? This is the silent variable we have not sufficiently analyzed, the internal pressure, the potential ostracization of those willing to compromise. This highlights precisely why the wrong individuals are currently in charge of the players' union. The leadership possesses variables in their personal equations that simply do not factor into the equations of the rank-and-file membership. There is a multitude of players who do not care about unrivaled or the business entanglements of their union representatives in competitive ventures. They simply want to play in the WNBA. Caitlyn Clark is one of them. I bring her up not as a distraction, but as a prime example of the silent majority who merely wish to compete. This situation has devolved into a disaster. It is officially a public relations catastrophe for the league, precisely at the moment when they had ignited the engines of growth, right after they began to capture the cultural zeitgeist. They have steered the ship into a storm of their own making. This is damaging. It is officially bad. The optics are terrible. The strategy is questionable, and the fallout is affecting the very fans they claim to serve. We must delve deeper into the nature of this exhaustion that is plaguing the fan base. It is not merely a fatigue born of waiting, it is a fatigue born of disillusionment. The fans were promised a revolution in the sport. They were sold on the idea that the arrival of generational talent and the securing of lucrative media rights would herald a new era of stability and expansion. Instead, they are being treated to a spectacle of administrative dysfunction and acrimony. The excitement about what teams might look like, the speculation about roster moves, the thrill of the expansion drafts, all of this has been suffocated by the heavy blanket of labor strife. The strategic decision by the league to utilize the qualifying offers, despite the moratorium talks, reveals a fundamental disconnect between the union's narrative and the economic reality the owners are trying to present. By sending these offers, the league was attempting to pierce the veil of rhetoric. They were trying to place a tangible number in front of the players, a reminder that revenue is a complex beast and that profit is the true engine of sustainable income, an engine that, as we have noted, has often been sputtering or non-existent in the history of this league. To chase a share of revenue without acknowledging the lack of profit is to chase a phantom. It is a pipe dream that threatens to shatter the concrete foundation of the business. And let us not overlook the specific mention of the expansion drafts for Toronto and Portland. These are not merely administrative dates on a calendar, they are the birth of new markets. They represent millions of dollars in investment, thousands of potential new fans, and the geographical growth of the brand. By allowing the labor dispute to delay these drafts, the union is effectively holding the future hostage. They are creating uncertainty where there should be excitement. The fact that the expansion draft date is not codified in the legally binding CBA creates a loophole of chaos that is now being exploited by the delay. Moreover, the issue of arena availability is a ticking time bomb. Arenas are multi-use facilities. They are businesses that cannot afford to hold dates open for a league that cannot guarantee its schedule. When Ramona Shelburne mentions arenas wanting to book dates, she is signaling a potential logistical collapse. If the WNBA loses its prime dates to concerts or other events because of this delay, the product on the floor, whenever it eventually returns, will suffer. The games will be pushed to less desirable times, to less desirable venues, further eroding the fan experience and the league's revenue potential. It is a self-inflicted wound of the highest order. The internal dynamics of the union, specifically regarding the unrivaled league, present a conflict of interest that is staggering in its implications. When you have Union Vice President Brianna Stewart, a figure heavily involved in a competitor league, advising players on WNBA contracts, the waters become murkier than a swamp. The quote, "They might be going out because that's how it's written," delivered with a tone of dismissal, suggests a strategy that prioritizes the leverage of the few over the stability of the many. It brings into sharp relief the question of who is actually being served by this hardline stance. Is it the average player trying to secure a paycheck, or is it the elite few with outside business interests? The specter of intimidation cannot be overstated. In a league with a history of strong personalities and, as Script A notes, a history of bullying, the pressure to conform to the union line is likely immense. If there are players who see the current offer as a lifeline, as a way to secure their financial future, do they dare speak up, or are they silenced by the fear of retribution, by the fear of being labeled a traitor to the cause? The idea that there might be intimidation going on right now among the union and its members is not just speculation. It is a logical inference based on the behavioral patterns we have observed. The holding pattern described is not just administrative, it is social. It is a forced solidarity that may very well be brittle at its core. The mention of players like Lexi Brown and Kalani Brown being the only ones signed through 2026 highlights the precariousness of the roster situations. The vast majority of the league is in flux. This should be a time of frenzy, of teams locking up their cores, of players securing their futures. Instead, we have a freeze. We have a moratorium. We have a standstill that benefits no one, least of all the fans who are growing more exhausted by the day. In conclusion, we are witnessing a PR disaster that threatens to undo years of progress. The WNBA had momentum, it had Caitlyn Clark, it had a new media deal, it had the eyes of the sporting world upon it, and now it has a labor dispute characterized by low-rent comments, personal grievances, and a union leadership that seems willing to risk the entire business over a pipe dream. The wrong people are in charge, the wrong strategies are being pursued, and the clock is ticking toward a deadline that could see the league lose not just a season, but its very soul. The exhaustion of the fans is palpable. The confusion of the league sources is evident. The frustration of the front offices is clear. And amidst it all, the players are being led down a path that may lead to a cliff edge. The decision to prioritize abstract fights over tangible gains, to value the advice of those with conflicting interests, and to potentially intimidate those who wish to compromise is a recipe for catastrophe. It is bad. It is officially bad. And until sanity returns to the negotiating table, we are left to watch the slow-motion derailment of what should have been the WNBA's greatest era. Peace. I am out. Until next time. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, for this story is far from over.